Planning Subcommittee meeting. I'm Councillor Sarah Williams and I'm chair of this committee, and I'll let the committee members introduce themselves.
Reg Race, Councillor of Tottenham Hill.
Yvonne Say, Councillor for Bounds Green.
Luke Hawley-Harrison, Councillor of Crouch End.
Peter Mitchell, Councillor for Woodside.
Liz Morris, Councillor for Highgate.
Barbara Blake, Councillor for Seven Sisters.
Thank you, Darren. We have officers present this evening.
Rob Shastovsky, Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability.
Ed Telepneff, Legal Advisor.
Roland McDocker, Head of Development Management.
Kyla Guilfoyle, Planning Officer.
Fiona Ray, Acting Committees Manager.
We also have other officers present who will introduce themselves when appropriate. This meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast by the Council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. Members and speakers are requested to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda, the planning protocol. I have several apologies for this evening. They have been received from Councillor Gina Adamu, and Councillor Barbara Blake is present as a substitute. We've also had apologies from Councillor Ibrahim and Councillor Peacock. I did hear you then. Somebody is saying, Mr. Sound Engineer, that they can't hear me. I don't know if there's anything you can do to help. Yeah, but we need the microphones for the live stream. The voices won't be picked up otherwise. So sorry about that. I'm sure he can tweak the sound a bit. Councillor Morris.
Yes, Councillor Ross is having some difficulty getting here due to traffic, but he is on his way.
Okay, thanks. There are no items of urgent business. Do members have any declarations of interest? And pages 1 to 12, in the pack, there are the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? Are they approved? Thank you. Is Councillor Ross likely to arrive within minutes? It's just he won't be able to take part in this item if we start without him.
I mean, I can give him a quick call now, if that's okay.
Let's do that, because I don't want to start and then he walks in 30 seconds. Just while we're doing that, I don't know if it would be easier if you can move your chairs forward. I don't know if that would help with hearing the meeting. I know you're a long way away.
Sure, can the technician do anything about that noise?
Yeah, testing. Testing. Yeah. We have been having meetings here for a long time now, but the sound is always an issue because it's such a big room, I think. Any news?
I've left a message. I can't get hold of him, sorry.
Okay, well, we'll just get on. So, HGY 2021, Ramsey Court, Park Road, London. And over to Mr. Guilfoyle to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the demolition of garages and removal of a parking area and the erection of 3 two-storey houses fronting Barrington Road with front and rear gardens and associated cycle and refuse and recycling storage. It also includes the erection of 6 apartments in a 3-storey building fronting onto Park Road with associated external amenity space, cycle and refuse and recycling storage. The application includes landscaping improvements around Ramsey Court, including a new communal garden, planting, trees, boundary hedging, and the provision of refuse and recycling store and cycle storage facilities. The application is part of the Council's agenda to provide affordable housing. It meets an identified need for new housing in the borough through an effective use of underutilised garages and the grounds of an existing site. It is a small site, but it makes a worthwhile contribution to housing supply. It comprises 9 flats and houses across 2 blocks. It would meet a 78% affordable social rent provision. The first part is Block A along Park Road. That is 100% social rent and comprises 2 one-bed flats, 3 two-bed flats, and 1 3-bed 5-person wheelchair accessible ground floor unit. Block B in Barrington Road comprises 2 market sale houses and 1 social rent house. They comprise of 1 2-bed flat and 2 3-bed 5-person houses. The application is located in an established neighbourhood with good access to public transport connections and existing neighbourhood facilities. On the top left, you can see a map of the site demarcated in red. The area comprising Block B is along Barrington Road and comprises the garages and hard standing adjacent to it. Block A is along Park Road on the bottom of the red line, and that is the green space to the southeast of the Ramsey Court building. The neighbours to the site on Barrington Road are 2-storey terraces to the north. To the east, there are terraced houses along Harefield Road. Some of them include loft conversions and roof extensions. And to the south, there is Park Road, and Park Road is of mixed character with varying building heights and brick varieties. To the west, you also have the junction between Park Road and Barrington Road. In terms of planning land designations, the site is in a critical drainage area, but there are no other relevant designations. On this slide, you can see a view of different aspects of the site, demarcated corresponding to the numbers. The image on the bottom left shows the view from Park Road adjacent to number 186, looking towards the end of Ramsey Court. And the image on the top right shows the garages in the foreground and Ramsey Court in the background. On the next slide, you can see Park Road. On the top left, you can see Ramsey Court. On the top right, you can see the area subject to Block A. On the bottom left, you can see the garages on the right and the substation on the left. And on the bottom right, you can see the pavement leading to the Ramsey Court flats between Ramsey Court on the left and the garages on the right. In terms of the land use principle of development, the key driver is policy DM20, which notes that there is some loss of open space. However, the site is not a designated open space in the local plan in planning policy terms. That means while it is an estate landscape amenity space, it is not protected open space in terms of parkland and so forth. The loss of open space must be balanced against the qualitative gains for the site and the Ramsey Court residents. These gains include the siting of the new block and its communal garden, which provide an open and flexible space with multifunctional potential, a safe and used play space with sitting spaces, sensitive to the remaining open space so the scheme avoids harm to the character and the function of the wider estate. It provides increased landscaping cover to the rear, and by that we mean the access lane, the parking spaces and the hard standing, which will be grassed over compared to existing. It provides biodiversity and ecology gains, and it would involve improvements to the boundary planting to the neighbouring Harefield Road residents. On balance, in terms of DM20, the scheme is considered to comply with its aims. The other key planning policy driver is policy DM7, and this concerns the principle of infill or backland garden land proposals. This policy requires a contextual site-specific response, and one of the key criteria is to have a street frontage, which the proposal achieves in the front and the rear. The proposal comprises a creative site-specific response, which relates appropriately to its surroundings. In terms of the loss of garages, there is a limited demand for parking, and as detailed later in the presentation, the transport impacts have been assessed and justified. So in conclusion, the scheme is considered acceptable in land terms. The extent of the building coverage and the amount of open space lost in terms of function and character is not significant, and this would be outweighed by the provision of affordable housing, for which there is a strong need and a planning policy support. The current slide shows the layout of the proposal. Block B along Barrington Road is on the top, and Block A is on the bottom left of the map. The scheme represents a contextual design which responds to the existing character in terms of the building scale, the form and the materials. It has been subject to a lengthy review and testing of various design options with officers, and the standard of accommodation complies with and in many cases exceeds the relevant space standards and so forth. Block B to the bottom right shows that the scale, the typology in terms of its house and its pitch roof, its architectural features and its materials reflect the housing along Barrington Road, whereas Block A, which is on the left of the drawing, shows the step scale between Ramsey Court and the adjacent terrace of number 186. Its width has been broken into two different components on the left and right side to articulate it and in order to relate to the housing adjacent. And the brick tone reflects the mixed varieties of the area and the weathered stock. In terms of the housing mix, the tenure and the quality, the scheme comprises 9 homes. 7 of these would be affordable social rent. Block A would be 100% social rent, comprising 2 1-bed, 3 2-bed, and 1 3-bed ground floor wheelchair accessible unit. Block B, which comprises the 2 market sale houses and 1 social rent house, will comprise 1 2-bed, 2 3-bed, 5-person houses. The mix will be mostly 1 and 2-bed units, but this mix is considered acceptable here given its location near Crouch End town centre and the longer route serviced by public transport and within a walkable distance to amenities. It would contribute to much needed housing need in the area, particularly in the social rent sector and for family-sized units too. The size, mix, tenure and quality of accommodation is acceptable. It meets the relevant planning policy standards. All units have an external amenity space, and the scheme would introduce improved communal grounds for existing and proposed units. One of the key aspects of the scheme is the landscaping, trees and ecology and biodiversity aspects. The scheme would involve the removal of 9 trees, and the trees have been categorised in accordance with British standards. 3 of the trees would be category B and 6 would be category C. The council's tree officer has assessed the scheme, and while some of the trees will be category B, overall the trees are not considered to be of particularly high value or amenity value compared to what is proposed. The proposal outlines a scheme for 20 new trees. 5 of these would be along Park Road and 15 would be on site. There is an error on that slide. The scheme would introduce some London plane varieties which would have a high amenity value in terms of their canopies, new native boundary hedging and other biodiversity improvements such as green roofs, more plant diversity and bird and bat bricks. In terms of transport, the scheme has a public transport accessibility level value of 2 and is located within a controlled parking zone. Because of this PTEL value and the CPZ location, new units would not be eligible for car-free restrictions where we would remove the eligibility to apply for a resident permit. The scheme is alongside bus routes on Park Road and near Crouch End town centre. At present, we have 10 existing car parking spaces comprising 7 in the garages and 3 marked out spaces. That includes 1 accessible space. Under the proposal, the 7 garages would be lost to houses and those spaces would be removed. The 3 marked out spaces would also be removed, but the 1 accessible space would be re-provided on Park Road, in addition to 1 additional new Park Road accessible space to cater for the ground floor flat in Block A. The car ownership census data shows that the predicted parking demand area for here is 7 vehicles. A parking stress survey has been undertaken to determine the capacity for displaced parking and for the demand for new unit parking. In total, the produced parking stress, this comprises the lost garages and the new units, is between 81 and 101%. This is the worst case figure because all of the garages may not necessarily be occupied and used for parking at the moment. And this figure also includes an assessment based on vehicles taking 6 meters to park on the street as opposed to a reduced distance, which is more common. The actual stress is likely to be based on a shorter 5.5 meter parking space length on the street. And based on this, the scheme has stress in a region of 90 to 91%. This is still above the 85%, which is considered a threshold to comprise parking stress, but it is acceptable on balance due to real life demand. In most cases, the garages would be used as storage, and the stress figure may well be reduced to a figure of 86 to 87% based on this reality. The result is that, based on the realistic interpretation of the use of the garages, which is understood to take place primarily for storage, there would be no significant or harmful loss of parking spaces. The scheme also provides for new highway works comprising accessible on-street parking spaces, retention of double yellow lines and a passing gap on Barrington Road, closing up the redundant entrance, and new curb and boundary works along the highway. It also provides for internal cycle stores for all units, which would be secured by condition. In terms of impacts on neighbouring amenity, we will first look at Block A. It's located to the southeast of Ramsey Court, and whilst there would be some impact on Ramsey Court, primarily from the windows and balconies on the southwest corner, this would not be harmful due to the setback and the location and size of the scheme relative to Ramsey Court. The main windows would avoid facing Ramsey Court directly, and the main outlook from Ramsey Court would not be harmfully impeded, as the diagram shows where a 45-degree splay is primarily maintained. Number 186, adjacent to the right-hand side of the block, is not residential, a ground floor unit, and the upper floor does not have side windows. Further, more to the northwest of the block, you have Harefield Road properties, and those properties are angled to the northeast, away from the site. There would be some impact to their outlook, mostly from the rear gardens when looking towards the site, but this impact would not be harmful due to the distance and scale from those gardens. The ground floor windows on the block would be set back from the boundary and angled to avoid overlooking, whereas the upper floor windows would face northwest towards the rear of those rear gardens, and the distance and angle would avoid direct overlooking of them. In terms of Block B, these two-storey properties would have some impact. The main impact would be on the Ramsey Court residents. In terms of Barrington Road, the distance and the scale would avoid any amenity harm. In terms of the Harefield Road properties, the properties will be between 16 and 28 metres from the rear gardens and rear building lines of those properties, which would avoid harm. In terms of the Ramsey Court residents, there is already an existing pedestrian parallel path between the new proposal and the Ramsey Court block, which serves the block and runs parallel to them. The closest distance between Block B and Ramsey Court would be approximately 10 metres, but the rest of the block would be angled to pull away from those windows, meaning that most building and windows would be between 12.5 and 22 metres away. The ground floor gardens on Block B would have boundary fences to limit the privacy impacts, and the first floor would be set back. The first floor would be interspersed to be set back with privacy screening in between. The current slide shows the floor plans of Block A. You can see on the first floor the windows are angled, and on the upper floor they're also angled. The current slide shows Block B with the ground floor gardens bounded by a fence, and the first floor including setbacks with balcony, terraces and screening. The current slide shows the elevations of Block A facing Park Road into the side, and the current slide here shows Block B facing Barrington Road. In summary, the scheme would provide affordable housing for 7 out of 9 units. In terms of land use and design, the scheme is acceptable and provides a contextual response with a good quality landscaping scheme. In terms of standard of accommodation, the units have generous layouts and sizes, an acceptable tenure and mix. They meet and exceed space standards. Their dual aspect or greater, provide for good daylight and outlook, generous internal layouts, and good amenity and child space provision. In terms of neighbouring amenity impacts, the scale, the layout and the orientation of the buildings and the windows and the distances between neighbours and the proposed blocks are acceptable to protect neighbouring amenity. In terms of transport, the traffic generation would not be materially harmed in terms of highway safety or parking conditions. Flood risk impacts would be acceptable. The scheme lies within flood zone 1, which is the lowest risk. Other issues include air quality and land contamination. There are no unusual issues identified here, and planning conditions have been imposed to manage these. In terms of sustainability, the scheme is an exemplar scheme of net zero in terms of carbon emissions, and because of this, there will be no carbon offset required. And in conclusion, you can see a visual summary of the Block A next to Ramsey Court in this slide. And on the following slide, you can see the Block B facing Barrington Road. And so the recommendation is to grant planning permission with conditions. Thank you.
Thanks. Do we have any questions of clarification from the committee? Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah, so a couple of points. I didn't really understand your resolution on the parking conditions if you're saying that the stress test is going to go up to 101% potentially, but there's going to be no material difference. I can't get my head around that. It also sits right on the boundary of a CPZ and no CPZ, so I'd like to understand what the stress test actually covered. Was it a radius around the site, or was it the particular CPZ that the site just falls within? Also, I don't think you referenced, but in the pack, I think it makes reference to daylight impacts on the units and that they are outside what is deemed guidelines acceptable. So if you could potentially comment on that as well. Also, it says that it's flood risk zone 1, the lowest. This area flooded twice in the summer quite severely. It sits on a culvert. I don't understand how it can be risk 1 when the council knows full well that it floods. So what provision is being put in place with this development to mitigate that beyond what seems like very basic drainage measures that would be in any other development? That's it for now, thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for those questions. I think on the parking stress, we'll just bring in Maurice from Transportation.
Sure, Chair. Chair, can you all hear me clearly? Hopefully.
You're not very loud, if you could.
I'll speak much louder. Can you hear me? Good. Okay, so Councillor, the parking stress is calculated within 200-meter radius of the site, and that's as the crow flies. In terms of the 101%, it's a worst case scenario where we assume all the garages were used for parking, and also that in terms of the length, it's actually 6 meters. So 5.5 meters is more realistic in terms of what you need for a car parking space. And that will bring you to about 92% in terms of what we think the stress would be. It will be above the 85%, which is the industry standard. But again, that 85% is based on 5 meters, not 5.5 meters. So in terms of transport planning, we've concluded that the parking stress survey and the methodology that was used was robust, and the scheme is supported from a transport planning perspective.
Thank you. And on the daylight question? Excuse me? Sir, if you'd let me chair the meeting, that was the third point of the question, I think you'd find. So we'll come to that in that place. If you could not shout out, we'd appreciate that too.
Like the previous council schemes we dealt with previously, the BRE guidance isn't a black and white fixed prescribed measurement, so it's designed to be used flexibly, particularly in response to the context. So in an urban context, you would have to have a more pragmatic approach in terms of how much light goes to each room. I don't have the specific detail to hand right now, but if I recall correctly, the report outlines that the light provision to each room depends on the nature of the room and the value placed on it. So, for example, light provision to a living room would be more important than I believe the report referred to in the deficit to bedrooms, where the provision would be, the expectation would not necessarily be as high. So, on balance, the scheme is compliant, and that's the view taken. But in terms of the actual prescriptive measurements for every single room, it's not always the case that we'll have 100% ideal light provision to every single bedroom in every single unit, and that's not necessarily how we would assess an application.
Thanks. And on the flood risk?
Yes, in terms of flood risk, there's two things here. The first thing is the flood zone, which isn't set by the council, but is actually set by the Environment Agency. So all sites lie in a flood zone 1, 2 or 3. And while we are aware there was flooding just last summer on that site, flash flooding, that falls into a second category, which is critical drainage area, which is a council policy. So we do acknowledge the site isn't a critical drainage area. However, huge swathes of the borough are in critical drainage areas, and that isn't necessarily an impediment to development, but rather it means that we have to take into account drainage infrastructure on site. So the scheme includes sustainable urban drainage infrastructure, SUDS, in the report, and we have a condition to require adherence to this and for our drainage officers to review that. But in terms of flood zone 1, all sites must fall in some flood zones, with either going to lie in flood zone 1, 2 or 3, and 1 being the lowest, which is what the report was trying to clarify.
Okay, thanks. I think that was all from Councillor Corley-Harrison, wasn't it? Yeah. So Councillor Morris, sorry, it was Councillor Mitchell first. Thanks.
Thank you. Paragraph 661 refers to the acoustic report and mentions the traffic noise. So are there measures in Block A, particularly the flats at the fronting onto Park Road, are there measures for the rooms that face onto Park Road to have adequate soundproofing? And also on the issue of sound, in paragraph 699, it talks about putting a noise limit on the air source heat pumps for Block B, but I wasn't clear whether Block A will also have air source heat pumps, and if so, whether similar measures would be needed there. And just to follow up the daylight point, so when it refers in paragraph 658 to some of the bedrooms not meeting the standard, is that both for blocks A and B? Thanks.
First of all, in terms of the measure for soundproofing, I don't believe there are any further measures in terms of Block A. My understanding was the soundproofing was referring to the external amenity spaces being more vulnerable on Park A, quite obviously because it's along a busy road, so sound levels would be higher there. In terms of the air source heat pumps, again, I believe all the plant would be on the roof of Block A. I would need to double check the plans to see what the layout is in terms of Block A, but I do understand there should be air source heat pumps on the roof. The particular vulnerability for Block B was because the pumps were lower down and next to the Ramsey Court block, so noise could travel easier to those Ramsey Court residents facing the rear.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Morris.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to talk about or ask about the loss of open space. I mean, in your presentation, you said it's not designated open space, but in 6.12, it's still considered to be open space. So DM20, Part B of the policy recognises that the reconfiguration of open space, where there is no net loss of open space, the development achieves enhancements in capacity, quality and accessibility. So can you clarify whether there is going to be a net loss, and if there is, how that works with policy DM20? And then the distances, so 6.89, so Block B, the distances between Block B and Ramsey Court, looking at between 12.5 metres and 22 metres. I thought the acceptable distance was 20 metres. So if you could clarify that. And then I think we have a balcony, which is going to be 10 metres away, which seems very close to me. And then this Thames water issue, I believe the development can't be located within 5 metres of a strategic water main. And so I wanted to understand whether the development or the proposals are going to have to change to deal with that, or have the plans that you've presented, do they work in line with that strategic water main? Thank you.
Yes, the short answer is yes, there is a net loss of open space. What the scheme tries to do and what DM20 acknowledges is that there sometimes needs to be a recognition that it's about quality of space as well as the amount of space. So the scheme, in summary, seeks to provide a better quality landscaping and open space environment for existing and proposed residents. Just moving on to your second question. Yes, the 21 metres is generally taken as design guidance typically for more suburban housing development, there's always the recognition, particularly in infill sites like this, where we're building housing in constrained sites, that we can't necessarily always achieve the ideal distance between units. The scheme and the layouts of the rooms are designed to be as least harmful as possible in terms of impacts on neighbours. There will always be an impact from a development, but yes, you're quite right. That is the narrowest point of the scheme, about 10 to 12 metres adjacent to Ramsey Court. And just going on to your third question on Thames Water, we had conversations with Thames Water in recent weeks about this, because it appears there was a misunderstanding on Thames Water's side. In short, they thought the water main ran in a different part of the site than it did. We've had email conversations with them where it shows the main is actually on the road and on the far side, so it falls outside that 5 metre threshold, because initially they had thought that the development would be within the no-build zone, and that's not the case.
Thanks for that. I don't think there are any. Oh, Councillor Colley Harrison.
I'll go if no one else does. In the report, it said that there was, I think, I've not got it to hand, but I think it was something like 101% reduction in carbon, something like that. I mean, it's just a lawn at the moment. I don't understand. Perhaps you can explain to me how we can have 101% reduction in carbon from lawn to a building site. And then, can I ask our tree officer a question as well, Chair? Is that okay? So I'm just wondering, based on the replacement 20 trees, I think it is, to replace the 9, how long we're looking at to get the same canopy coverage as we've got now from those 20 trees, or how many trees would be needed more immediately to get the same coverage, if you like?
With regards to the trees at the front, there's 3 Norway maples and 1 small apple, which are proposed for removal. Now, the replacement canopy cover for those would be what we've recommended is 5 London plane trees on Park Road. For them to provide the same canopy cover that is currently there would estimate 15 to 20 years, possibly. I mean, the trees that are there now, they have been managed by Crown Reduction Works. So every 4 years, they have a canopy reduction themselves. So they're not full canopy trees as such. So it's, you wouldn't be replacing 3 full canopy trees with 5 London planes.
Mr. Fraser, would you mind introducing yourself as well?
Okay. Apologies, Alex Fraser, Tree and Nature Conservation Manager.
And the carbon question.
Yes. In this instance, there's no carbon offset required. I think that is something we haven't necessarily seen on a site recently. So this is meeting all of its necessary carbon targets on site without a financial payment off site. So to achieve 100%, that's based against the standards, against current building regulations, and then predicting the emissions beyond that, and then ensuring that those are reduced through other measures. Ultimately, that usually ends up in a carbon offset, but in this case, that's not necessary, so you get to a figure of 101.
So for clarity, there's not a reduction against what's currently there. There will be more carbon produced as a result, obviously, because there will be a building on it producing energy.
That's right, yes, it's a reduction against a threshold target.
Thanks. If there's no more questions, we have 2 objectors registered to speak. Can I just clarify, is who's speaking? We have Joe Banks and Leah Govender, or do we have Anna Coast instead? She's arrived, okay. Fiona, where do you suggest they go to speak? Okay, so just give us a few minutes to set you up by the microphone. Hiya. No, excuse me. Hello?
Yes.
Hi. So hang on a minute. If you start speaking, you've got 3 minutes, and our clerk Fiona will time you. You'll hear a beep when time's up on that. And just, yeah, thanks. Over to you.
Please forgive me for reading this off the paper, but I dread public speaking. And as you can hear, English is not my first language, but I have so much to say, so it's better if I stick to the paper. I'm speaking on behalf of Ramsey Court residents. We are all horrified by this proposal. 160 statements of objection have been submitted. Nearly 1,700 people have signed a petition opposing it. And the hard copy petition has been previously delivered to the council, signed by all households in Ramsey Court. In short, there is no local support for this development whatsoever. The grounds for residents' objection include the irreversible loss of 40% of our amenity green space. The number of housing units on the site would increase by almost 38%. We would be hemmed in on all sides with no space. Ramsey Court was designed to support the exact number of households that it holds. It was deliberately not built any bigger, and that is why this green space exists. Building on this space would increase the density of population in this area to an unacceptable level. Not only does the planning application underestimate the ecological and environmental worth of this space, it also grossly underestimates the importance of it to the residents of Ramsey Court. This is our garden. Our children play here, and as do those from the opposite block of flats adjacent to the medical center. This space is vital for community relations in this part of Park Road. The proposal completely failed to address the very real negative impacts on our community that will result from this development. The green space around the flats is a defining part of the design and appeal of Ramsey Court, and is why we chose this flat as our family home. I have the noise and pollution of Park Road on one side of my flat, and currently my only calm space is the room facing the back. The noise from the heat pumps installed on the proposed flats would rob me of that calm space. The noise would be inescapable and incessant, and would impact my mental health hugely. And with more people now working from home, other residents have raised this as a major concern. The plans conflict with several policies contained in the Council's own development plan document, and the so-called environmental enhancements proposed will no way provide adequate compensation for the significant loss of our amenity space. There is a clear conflict here with planning policies that seek to safeguard the living conditions for present and future residents. The proposal fails to achieve those aims. Please hear us when we tell you that the proposed developments would entail a huge and very real loss to us and massively impact our well-being.
Thank you.
We urge you to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. So the same for you, Mr. Banks. 3 minutes. Thanks.
I'm Joe Banks, and I'm speaking on behalf of the neighbours of Ramsey Court and local residents. All of the key reasons for recommending this application have already been addressed in policy terms by the statement of objection prepared by planning consultants New Designs, which I believe all committee members have seen. So what I'd like to talk about instead is the essential issue here, which is whether or not the Ramsey Court green space, Site A, is a suitable site to build on, whatever the reason for that building. This green space has been a much-loved feature and amenity within the local community for the past 70 years. As well as contributing significantly to residents' sense of well-being, it provides a vital carbon sink alongside one of the borough's busiest roads, and also provides flood runoff. Preserving green space and tree cover is absolutely essential in combating climate change. And in Haringey's borough plan, one of its key stated objectives is to protect and improve green and open space and reduce CO2 emissions. And Mike Akata, the deputy leader of Haringey, has said he wants to see a massive expansion in canopy cover over the next 5 years. Yet the Ramsey Court application proposes the removal of at least 3 mature trees, probably more in practice should it go ahead, and a major reduction in the area of green space. The tree survey conducted in July 2020 appears to have played a critical role in persuading planning officers to consider developing this site. We strongly believe that the advice contained within this survey is wrong. The survey states that the trees under threat, Norwegian maples, fall into categories B and C and are of low quality and low life expectancy. However, we've had the trees assessed by an independent expert who concludes at least 2 of these maples are category A trees of high value and high life expectancy. It's widely accepted that local authorities should do everything possible to retain category A trees. Furthermore, the plan to mitigate the loss of these trees with the planting of 20 saplings is completely inadequate. In terms of carbon capture alone, at least 200 saplings would need to be planted to replace just 1 maple. The loss of these trees and this green space would be a tragic and irreversible event. We need to think about the legacy we are leaving future generations of Haringey residents. We believe that this is an entirely unsuitable place to build, and on visiting the site, both Labour and Lib Dem councillors have quickly come to the same conclusion. We completely reject the assertion that, quote, the loss of open space, given its function and character, is not significant, and we urge you not to grant this application. Thank you for listening.
Thanks. Members of the committee, do you have any questions for the objectors? Yeah. So, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
You have a question for the first objector?
You have to resume your seat. I don't know if we can get 2 seats there. I don't know.
Hi, thanks. Hi. I'll ask the same questions to the applicants as well, so worth listening. I'm just wondering what engagement you have had from the council's house building team in terms of getting the Ramsey Court residents' input on what happens with this space, or the 2 plots of space. Have they engaged you and led a co-design process on this?
Well, at the very beginning, yes, we had a meeting at the church at the bottom of Cranley Gardens. And that time the development was meant to be only at the back, but it was placed so close to our building. I can't really imagine how could somebody think of that. And then the second phase, it all was just communication by letters because of COVID, obviously. So I don't know if that was the question, if I answered it. So, and then the plans have changed, obviously, for building on the green space and at the back, but the back development was slightly reduced in size, but still very close to our building.
Okay, any others? Councillor Blake.
You talked about the importance of the green space and that it was vital for community relations and it was a much loved amenity. So can I ask, do residents get together and look after the space? Do you have a gardening group, for example?
Yes, of course.
Could you just talk a bit about that, please?
Yes. As you can see, there are some hedges there, and they were planted by the residents, not by the council. Obviously, council looks after them now. But, for example, flowers in the flower pots, if somebody litters there, we pick it up. We don't like it because we consider it to be our garden. And it's so important because that road is so noisy and polluted. During peak hour, we can't really open the windows. So if those trees go and there is more building there, that will be all lost and it's going to be much noisier. I can't imagine how it would be. I really can't.
Are there any more questions? Oh, there was Councillor Morris you were indicating.
Thank you. So following on from Councillor Blake's question, I just wanted to get a better understanding of how the residents use the space. I mean, are there children that play there?
Yes, they do.
You mentioned the gardening club, but it'd be good to understand how often the space is used and who uses it, which
people from the building, they just sit on the blanket, you know, in summer, or kids gathering there coming from school, or kids from the building. We have some small children living in the building, so the parents go there and that's where they play. Or also there is a handicapped person in the building, so the mom can't just push him far away. Sometimes it's just much more convenient just come down in that green space and settle.
Okay. Oops.
Also, when that green space is gone, it's gone.
Yeah, thank
Nobody
you.
will bring it back.
Thank you.
And it's important.
Thank you. Councillor. So I think we have Councillor Connor. Sorry, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name's Councillor Pippa Connor, Muswell Hill Ward, and I'm coming here today to speak to you on behalf of the residents who've objected to this development of Ramsey Court. This is not an objection to social housing. Indeed, increasing homes for social rent is welcomed. The material considerations, however, I wish the Planning Committee to consider are density of the build, including the loss of green space, removal of mature trees and poor air quality, then the design of the flats, and finally the fact that the Day and Sunlight report notes that some areas within the new block of flats do not meet the recommendations around daylight. In the new London Plan 2021 Policy G1, London's network of green and open spaces, green features in the built environment should be protected and enhanced. This is not happening on this site, as this build will increase the density of the development, remove mature trees with a real loss of green space at the front. In terms of the proposed green rooftop, if it falls into disrepair, will it be roofed over? The Haringey Development Management Plan 2017 Policy DM23 on air quality states that all development proposals should consider air quality and be designed to improve or mitigate the impact of air quality for any development. However, the Air Quality Assessment Report clearly shows that Park Road has high levels of pollution, both in nitrogen dioxide levels and fine particle matters. To offset such air pollution, the need for mature trees is vital. However, this development proposes the removal of these such trees. Putting a block of flats on a green space doesn't enhance or protect this green space. I would argue that the flats should not go ahead as they don't fulfil Policy G1 nor DM23. In the London's Plan 2021 Policy D3, Delivering Good Design, it states that development proposals should enhance local context by delivering buildings and spaces that positively respond to local distinctiveness through their layout, orientation, scale, appearance, with due regard to street hierarchy, forms and proportions. Ramsey Court is an iconic building set back from the road with gardens at the front. The housing surround it is mainly Victorian or Edwardian. I would argue that a brick block building set close to the road does not enhance either Ramsey Court or the surrounding residential buildings. As such, this would not comply with Policy D3. Finally, I'd bring the committee's attention to the lack of daylight within the flats. In 6.58 of the officer's response, they note that in terms of the no skyline test, some bedrooms of units would not have access to direct skylight over a significant part of the working day. This lack of daylight is hugely important in this era of working from home. In objecting to this development, I'd ask the committee to address the material considerations highlighted above and consider whether this development is appropriate, given it will be removing part of the current green space from a council-owned block. Thank you.
Thank you, and perfectly to time as well. Thanks. Councillor Gordon, you've got 3 minutes also. When you're ready. Thank you. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you. Well, I would like to commend to the committee that we approve this application. I want to draw your attention to the fact that this is part of our ambitious council house building programme, and part of the project before you today has got three-bed family homes at genuinely affordable council rents. This is what we're trying to achieve in order to make sure that we can house a desperate need amongst families in this borough for council homes. I've had quite a lot of discussion about this project, quite rightly, because there's been, as you can see, a lot of objections to it. I've been up to the site on several occasions. I've met with the residents as well. Some of the criticism put to me was related to, well, can't you build more council homes in the east of the borough? Well, my answer to that is that the actual need is also in the west of the borough, especially for family-sized homes. The people that will directly benefit from these homes will be local secure tenants. It will help to ease overcrowding because tenants will be able to apply under the neighbourhood move scheme to move into these flats. Now, I think that if we take the issue of questioning and scrutiny, I absolutely value that. In fact, I'd probably say that the more things are scrutinised, the better result that you get. And we've been working with residents for 18 months now and hearing all of the feedback, all of the criticisms, and that has shaped and changed these plans as they've gone through several iterations to get to the stage where we're at now. And I think what we've done is we've come up with a scheme that is highly commended. If you think of the green credentials, this is probably one of the best schemes that we've brought forward with the zero carbon, as you've heard earlier on in the presentation. We will be enhancing that space. We will be increasing the biodiversity. We will be putting in bat boxes and bird boxes. I'd ask you not to interrupt me, thank you. We'd be increasing the hedging around the open space with colourful planting to give a new welcoming public space that can be used for tenants and existing tenants in the block already. In terms of the green credentials to the housing scheme itself, then that net zero carbon has been achieved through double glazing, through the air source heat pumps. That means that for the tenants that move in, they will not only be able to have a comfortable house that is comfortable to live in, but also cheap to heat. There's wastewater recovery. There are solar panels on the roof. This last week, is that my time up, Chair?
Thank you.
Thank you. I recommend that this is approved,
Okay,
this application is approved. Thank you.
Do any of the committee have questions for either of the councillors? Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Gordon, you said that there had been ongoing engagement with residents, but the objector we just spoke to basically said that there hadn't. So can you elaborate on exactly what engagement has happened with residents, what feedback you've taken and how the scheme has altered based on that feedback?
Thank you. Well, as I said, I visited the site on a couple of occasions myself and spoke directly with residents, and there has been a number of online and some face-to-face engagement. I'll ask the officers to come in with the exact detail, but the scheme has changed in light of the discussions that have taken place over the last 18 months. But on the exact number of consultations and engagement exercises we've had, maybe ask the officers to give the exact number.
Mr. Cowie, are you going to?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The scheme has been some time in the making, and as the speaker earlier on had noted, we undertook an initial engagement exercise with the community based on a different scheme. It had all the development effectively on the Barrington Road side. Concern was raised about a couple of the sort of properties that we were proposing on the existing hard standing on that side of the Ramsey Court block. And we took that away and considered what other options were available on Ramsey Court. And then we focused as a project team on looking at the Park Road side. And we appreciated clearly there would have been issues at the time in relation to the loss of the space, the loss of trees. And we put forward a scheme with a block on that front and then went back out to wider engagement. There was concern, as we expected, in relation to the loss of the space and the trees. So we worked very carefully to sort of manage that block in a way which ensures that we lost the minimum number of trees. We then looked at focusing on enhancing, where we could, the environmental quality of the estate generally. We also looked very carefully at tree replacement options, working with your planning officers and Alex Fraser, your borough's tree officer, and we've put forward a scheme that we hope struck a balance between, as you've heard, trying to deliver much needed affordable homes, whilst also trying to ensure that we mitigate against environmental the environment, but also neighbouring residential amenity.
Okay, thanks. I think that answers that. Are there any other questions for the councillors from the committee? No, if not, then we can go over to the applicant team. So you have an amount of time, which is a sum. So let me hang on, I'll just get a steer on that. It's quite an easy sum, actually. It's 6 minutes. You don't have to use all of it, but it's available to you. Thanks. If you could introduce yourselves before you speak, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
It's on.
It's on. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kieran Curtis from KCNA Architects. So there are a number of points that I'd like to pick up on that have been made. Probably the largest of which is the location of what we're calling Block A on Park Road within that green area to the right-hand side of Ramsey Court. So we, as my colleague mentioned, carried out a number of consultation events, and after the first event, we actually responded to suggestions from a number of the visitors of the event that that we should actually look at that site in preference to some of the proposals that we had for additional houses to the rear of Ramsey Court. So this was something that we responded to out of the consultation process and then went on, as we talked about, to analyse and take forward. Our understanding is that that space, albeit open space and albeit that it does contribute to the street scene and the general greenness of that section of Park Road, is really ancillary space, incidental space to Park Road, to Ramsey Court. It's actually open to Park Road, and we've talked, people have mentioned the traffic on Park Road. It's open apart from partially a hedge along the frontage there to that. What although we are building undeniably upon that green space and removing some trees, what we're creating is a new garden in place of the car park hard standing at the rear of Ramsey Court and a large area that used to be a concrete area, asphalt area that used to be a drying area. We're replacing those with a communal garden of
Sir, can you please not interrupt? Thank you.
Of over 420 square metres. Now that space is designed for as a much better communal space and much more accessible. It's overlooked by the residents of Ramsey Court, and it's not open to the road as the current area to the rear is. So that's our approach to the green space. We're actually mitigating the proposal by creating a new communal garden which is landscaped. Just a few quick points in terms of the quality of the proposed accommodation. it's mentioned it is the case that some of the bedrooms to the Block A on Park Road don't meet the recommendations of BRE in terms of the sight of the sky. But there are two measures for daylight, and one of them is the average daylight factor. Every room, every habitable room within the scheme, both on Block A and Block B, pass that criteria. The what other points do we want to make? I'd like to actually, if possible, bring in my colleague James Ray, who's been the architect on this, just to talk about the contextual design approach that we've taken. So if James is available, he's actually on online at the moment. If we could give him a moment. While we're finding him, we spent a lot of time actually analysing the context in terms of the character of both Barrington Road and Park Road. Barrington Road is characterised by the Edwardian buildings with bays. They have a very characteristic recessed entrance with the canopy and a strong horizontal line. We looked at the window proportions. We looked at the rhythm of the buildings. We looked at the roofscape and the materials. And the houses that we've designed there pick up on many of those features and incorporate them in a contemporary way to actually reflect and sit contextually. The same thing applies to the building on Park Road. We've looked at the rhythm of the original plot widths. Ramsey Court was built on the site of a bomb damaged area, and there used to be a terrace continuing from number 186 Park Road all the way through to the junction with Barrington Road. So we've actually continued that building line and looked at the old plot widths which inform the design of Park Road. We've looked at the use of materials. So we're matching in the brickwork to those adjacent buildings. We're highlighting the design with reconstituted stone accents that refer to the stucco work that you find up and down Park Road. And we've looked at the proportion of windows as they giving the building a base, a middle, and a top. And the rhythm of those windows as well, in terms of you have a pair and then a single rhythm, and then that's reflected across the two plots. So thank you very much. If there's any questions, please do let me know.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant team from Councillor Corley-Harrison?
Thanks. Just wondering how you got to the process of the Block B design to A and B. And there was an indication that residents have made the suggestion of using what is now Block B plot after an earlier design being solely on Block B. Have you gone back out to residents with the proposals for Block A and B and said, you know, which is your preference on this site? Is it to develop on both sides, or is it to develop on one side? Is there a general community support for a dual development versus a single development? That would be my first question. Also, I'd like to know about the private sale housing, which is on in Block B, and the reasoning for that, rather than that being social housing, if the site is, as I understand it, fully council owned. And because that obviously changes the dynamic of things between if you had just Block B coming forward, even in its current form, if that was all social rent on the Block B side, that would be 3 units rather than 1, as it were, and what the original plans were for Block B and how many units could have fit on there. And you touched very briefly on design and how you'd arrived at the design, particularly of Block A. I have to say I don't find it the greatest design, not too inspiring, and we do have a rather ugly building just further down Park Road, subjectively rather ugly, Granston House, which I have to say is quite overbearing on the road, also has a very boxy, flat-topped feel. And they're actually adding another story to that, I believe. That is very close to the perimeter boundary, the pavement, as this one is. So I'm wondering how you arrived at the decision to bring it so close to the pavement edge. In effect, I appreciate it's in line with the housing stock next door, and why the box appearance, why the flat roofs when it's next to pitch roofs, for example, and rather than something that is, I suppose, slightly more softened in nature.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor, for you, Chair. Just to pick up your point about sort of how we presented the current proposals to the community, we didn't present a kind of binary choice. We obviously took the feedback from the initial engagement exercise, as I've said. We sought to ensure that we presented a scheme that we felt complied with planning policy before going out to the community, and then we sort of presented what you see before you effectively now. We took that feedback on, we assessed how that measured against our scheme and planning policy. We refined the proposals, so as Kieran has mentioned, we looked to seek to enhance the environmental quality of the estate, and we looked to seek to ensure that we redesigned the block and the houses so that it very much mitigated against things like loss of sunlight, privacy, and so on and so forth. So effectively, that's what we presented, and hence working with the local planning authority as well on a consistent basis to ensure that we presented a scheme that we felt was fully compliant, and obviously it's a development that, you know, it will impact in some way, but not in a way that is harmful to neighbouring residential amenity in planning terms. I think just picking up your point about the design rationale, I mean, Kieran's sort of gone into some detail on that. As a project team, we were seeking to ensure that we could optimise the land available to deliver predominantly social housing. Very much as a consequence of feedback from the community and your planning officers, we did reduce the size of the block on Park Road, not least to bring it away from boundaries and Park Road frontage, but also to ensure that it mitigated against loss of privacy and so on. So we very much did consider very carefully how we sort of sat that block in relation not only to existing property, but in respect to that Park Road frontage. Now, Park Road, as we all know, is of terrifically mixed character. There are buildings of all shapes, sizes and styles. And what we have tried to do is present a contemporary building using traditional materials, but sort of seeks to ensure that it gives that quality appearance. We've got some materials with us tonight in terms of brick samples. We can share those with you if the chair would like us to demonstrate sort of the care and attention we've given in terms of sort of the architectural detailing. We appreciate that it's a high quality sort of, well, as a council, we need to deliver high quality development. You know, we have to lead by example. So we are very much sort of putting a lot of effort into ensuring that the designs of these schemes are very attractive and robust. You touched upon also the issue regarding the market sale homes. Part of this programme, as you know, is very much about delivering genuine affordable homes at social rent. Now, in some instances, we can do that and fund purely social rented homes. In other instances, we are able, through the guidelines, to fund social housing using market sale to cross-fund. Given the values that are sort of available in an area such as this, we sought to sort of ensure that we could cross-fund some monies through the provision of market sale for the remaining sort of 9 social rented homes. That really is essentially the rationale behind the 2 market sale units. We'd ideally like to provide, yes, all 9 units of social rent, but we have to obviously utilise sort of public monies responsibly, and where we can, on a limited basis, we will sort of seek to sort of cross-fund. That is why we've got those 2 units on the Barrington Road frontage. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. I believe there was an offer of, have you got the brick with you? Would the committee like to see? Because we did it at the site visit, that we were questioning the brick colour. Would that be helpful? That looks too big to be a brick.
Sorry, Chair, just to sort of confirm that's the proposed brickwork for the Park Road block. The second sample is the Barrington Road brick sample. Now, these are just samples. We appreciate that there is a condition controlling the nature of the brickwork and materials.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. That was particularly helpful because the committee members were asking about brick colour at the site visit, so thanks for bringing that. Are there any other points from the committee? Any questions of clarification or no? So the recommendation in front of you is to grant permission for this. So could I see, please, subject to the informatives and conditions. Do you want to read the resolution, please, Robbie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Resolution is to grant permission subject to conditions and informatives as set out in the agenda report. Thanks.
So could I ask committee, and we know Councillor Ross, you're unfortunately unable to vote in this one due to your lateness. So apologies, we did consider waiting for you at the beginning.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise for being late. Despite being a Tottenham fan all my life, I forgot Spurs were playing tonight. Will it be recorded that I'm unable to vote in the minutes?
Yes, I believe so, yes. Thank you. So all those in favour, Councillor Colley-Harrison.
Sorry, on the conditions, I think there was one where it had to pass by, in terms of the satellite provision, pass by planning control or something like that. Can we just make sure that it's not any visible satellite dishes or the usual condition that would have been put in, and maybe that's updated for future developments in that respect?
Sorry, I don't quite understand the question. Page 52 has condition 19 on satellite dishes. You want further wording added to that? Is that, am I understanding you, that to say visible satellite dishes?
Page 92. 52. Oh, sorry.
Page 52, condition 19.
Yeah, sorry, I'd only seen 18, not 19. Thanks, Robbie. Yeah.
Okay. So all those in favour of the resolution to grant permission, please show now. Okay, and all those against? So what was that? Fiona?
6 for, 2 against, 1.
Yeah, so that's 6 for, 2 against and 1 not voting. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for the applicant team and thank you for objectors for coming along tonight. Next item on the agenda is HGY 2021-2151, 109 Fortis Green. And we have Valerie O'Key. Are you coming along? Yeah, we're about to continue with the meeting, so if you want to have a chat, can you do it somewhere else, please? Excuse me, could you have your chat outside, please, because we have to continue with the meeting. Thank you. If you could continue your conversation outside the meeting, please. Thank you. Okay, Ms. O'Key, over to you to present. Thank you.
Good evening. The proposal is for demolition of all existing structures and redevelopment of the site to provide 10 residential units comprising of 6 residential flats and 4 mews houses and 131 square meters of flexible commercial space on ground and lower ground floor, basement car parking and other associated works. This is the site location plan. The site is highlighted in red, and the site is located within the Fortis Green Conservation Area. This is an aerial view of the site, which is currently occupied by a car wash, valet service, and MOT car repairs centre. And to the rear are the row of terrace houses on Annington Road, and immediately east is the single-storey structure occupied by the Majestics Wine, and to the west is the former office building converted into flats, and adjacent is the former Muswell Hill Police Station, which is locally listed and now in residential use. There are also 3x3 storey dwellings within the rear of this former office building. This is a view of the site from Fortis Green Road, or Fortis Green, sorry. Planning permission was previously approved by the Council's Planning Subcommittee in September 2016. This was followed by a minor revision to this approved scheme that was granted in July 2017. Neither planning permission was implemented, and both have now since lapsed. The current proposal, which is almost identical to the last permission, is for 10 residential units 5 family size units, a financial contribution towards affordable housing within the borough, 131 square metres of flexible commercial floor space, 10% wheelchair accessible units, private communal amenity space provision, which comprises of gardens, balconies and child play space, landscaping, disabled parking provision, cycle parking and electric car charging points. The changes since the last permission approved in 2017 includes minor changes to the internal layout of the commercial unit, Muse Houses and Apartment 1, reduction in the commercial unit floor space by 22 square metres, external changes to the front and rear elevation to the main street facing building, minor changes to the housing mix, and a financial contribution towards affordable housing within the borough. Since the previous planning approval, there has been changes in the planning policy context. However, changes in policy has not impacted on the acceptability of the proposal, but rather reinforces policy support. I will now focus on one of the key issues. In terms of affordable housing, the previous scheme, after being independently assessed, provided no financial contribution towards affordable housing. This scheme, however, after being independently assessed, provides a financial contribution of £277,343 towards off-site affordable housing. This contribution will be pooled to contribute towards the provision of social rented homes as part of the Haringey's Council Housing Building Programme. An off-site contribution is considered acceptable in this instance, as set out in paragraph 6.3.6 of the main report, and an early stage and late stage review mechanism will be secured by a legal agreement. This is the proposed basement plan to the left, which accommodates 8 car parking spaces, as well as cycle storage for the new residential units. The basement also accommodates a level for the new commercial unit to the north and accommodation to serve the new Muse houses to the south. This is the ground floor plan to the right, where there is separate access to the commercial unit, residential flats above, and Muse houses to the rear, private courtyard garden and recycling and refuse area. This is a 3D view of the rear and front of the main street facing building. This is a 3D view of the rear and front of the Muse houses. This is the proposed landscaping plan, which includes an area for child play space and the private gardens to the Muse houses to the rear. This is the Section 106 head of terms. Officers consider that the changes to the proposed scheme in comparison to the previous approved development are minor, and the change in policy context does not affect the assessment of planning merits of this proposal. The proposed scheme also provides a financial contribution towards off-site affordable housing provision within the borough, where the previous scheme did not. Accordingly, the proposal is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do we have any points of clarification from the committee? Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I'm concerned of the proposal to give, is it 200 and something odd thousand as a contribution to development outside that particular geographical area. We get this from time to time. Why is it that council housing is not supported in places like Forest Green, but pushed to some other part of the borough, mainly the eastern part? Because this is really what's behind this policy. You simply don't build enough units in a development such as this. And then you say, oh, well, they can go elsewhere and take this little money with you and get out the way. It is, in my mind, it's not acceptable. I suspect the office has got nothing to do with it. It's really a matter of policy which the council has laid down. But it's not offices strictly within their tenure. But I'm appalled with this. I was in the previous development that granted permission to the police station, and the same thing happened there. You know, you don't get a full share of the cake. You say, well, go elsewhere and take this money, you can do what you like with it. Not good enough. We should be able to provide adequate housing from a development such as this, which is shared tendencies from people from this side of the borough as well as the west side of the borough.
Mr. Szytowski.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm, as the Chief Planner, we do control how we spend Section 106s across the borough, and we can spend Section 106 money for affordable housing in the west of the borough as well as the east, and that will be quite possibly be the case with this one as well. We do spend it on smaller schemes in the west of the borough. We do spend it on buying properties that can be used for affordable housing as a net increase in affordable. So actually contributions in the west of the borough can be put to good use for new affordable housing. So the contribution will be put to good use, and I make sure that Section 106s are spent appropriately.
Councillor Say, I think were you indicating? No, sorry, Councillor Coley-Harrison.
Yeah, well, I'd like to follow up on that point, because I feel like this does contradict somewhat the application that we've just had, because Councillor Gordon, who's still here, I believe, made very clear that we needed more affordable houses in the west of the borough. This application is basically saying, well, but not on this site, let's put it elsewhere. I appreciate you're saying, well, it could go somewhere else in the west of the borough. Well, of course it could. I don't know, maybe we can condition that it has to be spent within a proximity. But what I'd also like to know is whether there would have been an opportunity for this to be spent on intermediate housing within this particular site plot, because it seems like all housing coming forward has to be social rent at the moment, and that just excludes such a huge amount of people that cannot afford to get onto the property ladder without some financial support from the council or from the London Mayor, etc. And this would have been a great opportunity to provide affordable housing in a part of the borough that has very, very few affordable houses. On the previous application, we had 3 townhouses sat side by side. One was going to be private and 2 were going to be social rent, each with their own front door. This pack suggests that we can't have an individual affordable house in a plot, which is just simply not true. We can, and we, as you have just said, buy up individual sites, individual buildings, and have those as council homes. We have plenty of Victorian street fronted council homes. So the contradictions between reports either means that our policy is out of date and our policies need changing, or the information supplied within the report needs changing. Because I think we're being presented with an inaccurate picture that means that we are feeling forced down the road of supporting an application which just gives cash in hand towards affordable housing that's probably going to end up, in all honesty, in the east of the borough rather than the west of the borough. So what do we need to do to change this policy?
Just to come back on that, I think firstly, as a suggestion, we could amend the heads of terms to put in a cascade mechanism that this is spent first of all within the Forest Green ward where the development is located, and then in neighbouring wards if that's not possible, and then other wards in the west of the borough. that would be an obligation on the council rather than on the developer, and we could come up with suitable wording for that to mitigate that concern. In terms of the affordable housing not being on site, that is just pure practicalities. 277,000 wouldn't be enough to purchase one of the units within this scheme, even at shared ownership levels. It wouldn't be feasible for a registered provider to take one of those units within this scheme. They wouldn't be willing to do that. The council's priority is building our own housing. Purchasing street properties is obviously different, where they're not within a block. There's not management charges across communal areas and things like that. So those practicalities all add up to not making it feasible to take a unit here for affordable housing.
Thanks. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. When I was first elected 8 years ago now, this is one of the first, or the previous application on this site was one of the first planning applications I was contacted about, and there were huge opposition to a underground parking there. But my main point is that I was surprised that this hasn't been seen by the Quality Review Panel, because I know the Quality Review Panel does meet 2 or 3 times sometimes with planning applications. I know it met in 2015, but the membership of that panel has changed since then. The London plan, the local Harrogate plans have all changed since then. I'm sure the membership of the panel has changed since then. I just wondered why it hadn't met. And I've also got a point about, page 106 at the bottom. Local ward councillors. Well, of course, Councillor Berriman is not a local ward councillor, although he does live in the area. And I just wondered what the Councillor Hinchcliffe and Berriman, I noticed they're not here tonight, but I just wondered if you comment on what those comments were from Councillor Berriman. And it's a very, very minor point, not really to do with this application, but why are we using 2011 census data when we're now well over a year since the 2021 census data? Thank you, Chair.
Who wants to come in on the QRP?
Yes, so whilst the Quality Review Panel, has not reviewed this scheme, which was reviewed, well, the previous scheme was reviewed in 2015, because this scheme is almost identical to what was approved, and the scheme responds to the detailed advice of the panel and officers, we felt that a Quality Review Panel wasn't necessary in this instance.
On the census?
On the census, not all of the data, in fact, most of the data from the census last year is not yet published. So that's why most people still use the 2011 census. So yes, it does feel out of date, but it's the best information we've got. So that's the reason why.
So I have the comment here from Councillor Hinchcliffe. One of the comments was about the inclusion of underground parking. The other comment was about the basement plans should be omitted from the scheme and cars should be simply parked in the road. Also, another comment was to do with the height of the development having an impact on daylight, sunlight and privacy, in particular to the residents who back onto the site at Annerton Road. And there was also a comment about dust and debris from the construction.
Thanks. All right. Now, Councillor Ross, you want to come back?
I do actually. I understand now that the QRP panel would have made very few comments on this new application. How does the fact that the previous applications have fallen away because they've gone past the 3 years, does that affect this new application? And I do have one other comment afterwards, Chair.
Yes, that's a good question on the previous permissions. They are no longer extant, so that diminishes the weight you should give them. If they were still in place, you would have to give them quite significant weight. But they are still a material consideration. Policies don't change significantly, and the development has been accepted under largely similar policies. So that gives them a reasonable level of weight that you should give in your decision making.
Thanks. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of points, but starting off with this issue about the contribution for affordable housing. So the point was made that the viability report was independently assessed. Well, I looked at that on the planning web pages, and the assessment from BNP, I mean, almost all of it is redacted. It's meaningless. And why is this? Because previously we've been able to see those assessments, and I thought the council had a policy now that they were published. Whereas this one, the profit level that's been used is redacted, the estimates on sale prices are redacted, and then it finishes with 3 blank pages. We just get headings and then they're entirely blank. So I really don't think that's acceptable. But if I can move on to the other points I wanted to raise. On page 119, 6615, it says that none of the amenity areas meet the sunlight target. So my question was, is that relating both to the flats and to the mews houses at the rear? I also had a query about play space, because on page 118, it gives the child yield estimate and says that the play space provided, 42.5 square meters, exceeds the requirements. But then on page 127, it just refers to a small area for informal play. So my understanding of the sort of courtyard area was that that was just a general open space. I mean, can you clarify, is there any specific play space within that? On page 151, there's a reference to neighbouring windows being affected. And it says that the only neighbouring windows that would lose a noticeable amount of either day or sunlight are onto rooms that receive most of their day or sunlight from other windows, and so wouldn't be affected by the development. I mean, it's not clear whether that's referring to properties at the rear on Annington Road or properties opposite on Fortis Green. But I really couldn't work out how it was possible that rooms in either of those would actually have windows facing 2 directions. I mean, the houses on Annington Road, for example, appear to be a terrace. So if they've got windows facing the rear of the mews houses, I can't see how they've got windows elsewhere unless it goes right through to the front of the house. So perhaps you could just clarify that point. On waste collection, on page 178, it says that the waste vehicles must be able to enter and exit forwards. I mean, my assumption is they're not entering at all because the only vehicle access is to the basement car park. So can you just clarify that actually the waste collection will be from Fortis Green? And if so, does that mean that all properties have to move bins to the main road for that purpose? And then finally, on the QRP, I mean, okay, accepting that it's referring to the previous application, but it's been said that there's not a huge difference. there were 2 points that concerned me. So on page 198, it says that the main challenge that the tight layout presents is the distance between the mews houses and the apartments across that courtyard. But I couldn't find out what that distance was, so perhaps you could confirm that. And then the final point from the QRP that concerned me on page 199 was that the entrances to both the flats and the mews houses, or the pedestrian entrance, is via a narrow passage. And it certainly looks narrow on the drawings, but it's difficult to gauge. So can you give us any information about how wide that pedestrian entrance is? Thanks.
Quite a lot of points. So.
Yes, I'll start with the viability. You are correct that that should have been published in full. Apologies for that. We'll make sure that continues as a standard practice. Profit level was 20%, which is within the reasonable tolerances and has been accepted by our third-party assessor. I think, Valerie, are you okay on neighbouring windows and play space?
The neighbouring windows that are referred to is the former office building, which is 115, not the properties on Annington Road. The properties on Annington Road, the distance is 18 metres between the rear of the mews houses and the rear facade of the properties on Annington Road. So it's the neighbouring property, which is the former office building at 115 Fortis Green. Yes, so
just I'll quickly cover the waste collection. That would be from Fortis Green. That's correct. So I think the standard approach is that they move in a forward gear, but in this case it's an on-street collection, so there will be a management arrangement to bring bins to within the recommended distance to be picked up on collection day. And I think probably perhaps worth bringing in Richard just on some of the QRP comments.
Thank you. Yeah, Richard Truscott, Design Officer. So the questions, well, I don't know what the distance across the courtyard is. Val, do you know what the distance across the courtyard is? I've not got that to hand, I'm afraid.
sorry, the distance across the courtyard is 11.2 metres, well, and also 12.8 metres.
But isn't it correct that the mews houses don't generally have habitable room windows facing onto the courtyard? They have like sort of front door, hall windows, kitchen windows, but not bedroom windows. The bedroom windows face onto their garden and onto their roof terraces, I believe. Is that correct?
So a number of the windows have been either have obscure glazing or they've been thoughtfully designed.
I think you answered the question about the rooms that don't rely on windows facing the site to get their daylight and sunlight because they have windows facing in other directions. So I think that covers everything from the QRP, doesn't it? Or is it, or I missed something, Councillor Mitchell?
If I may, Chair, yeah, it was the width of the passage to enter, for pedestrians to enter.
Off the top of my head, I don't know. It's about 2 meters, I think, isn't it? Well, it's not a narrow passage. It may have looked like a narrow passage on the plans, but you know, it's not as wide as the driveway into the car park, but it's a decent width. I think there's some plans attached to the report, aren't there?
It's 2 metres.
Just the question on play space to go, is that right? Yeah.
Just on that, Councillor Mitchell, I had your first reference to page 118. What was your second reference?
So on page 127, paragraph 6.10.9, that just refers to a small area for informal play.
Yes, I think that is the same area. So that is the 42 square meters, just I suppose serving a slightly different purpose. That it's not swings and slides. You know, it's boulders and rocks and plants for toddlers to scramble over. It's that sort of space that serves those two purposes.
Thanks. Councillor Morris, I think you indicated, did you? No. Any more? This is take 2. We've got a big agenda tonight, so as concisely as you can, please, Councillor Ross.
It's a very quick one. On bottom of page 130, it talks about reconstruction of the vehicle crossover. There are actually 2 Victorian or Edwardian vehicle crossovers using cobblestones. And funnily enough, I noticed that this is common in this part of the borough as well, because my walk up from Seven Sisters, just before I got to Tottenham Town Hall, there's cobblestone crossovers. Can we put some sort of condition in, assuming, well, not assuming anything, but if this is agreed, that vehicle crossover can be reconstructed using the original cobbles?
I think just worth bringing transportation colleagues in to explore whether there's any reason we can't do that.
Council, we'll explore it. We can put an informative to explore it. It may be that it's as granite sets or a similar set, but it's something I can ask the highways teams to look at.
Would an informative be satisfactory to you, Councillor Ross? Okay, thanks. And Councillor Corey-Howson, did you want to come back as well?
Well, just on the earlier point, I remember certainly in 2018, maybe later, councillor comments in either direction were always included in the pack rather than relying on us going and finding it on the planning application. So I'm wondering if you can take that forward. Obviously the same as well with any viability statement. I think in full that should be included within the pack rather than us having to search it out on the application website.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yes, yep, we can certainly do that, yeah.
Okay, so there's no more questions on the report. I think we have an objector here. Yeah, Chris Holton. If you'd like to go and sit where there's a microphone, please. So same as we had before, once you start speaking, you have 3 minutes and you have to just press the button and a little red light will come on here. Yeah, good to go.
Thanks for having me. I'm a local resident, 17 years, and very close to this development, and raising a family and living very close to this site. I'm actually quite impressed by the original design spec and detailing and effort that's been gone into this development. However, I do support the development of the site for residential purposes, as the current site has been left in limbo for over 7 years. I would welcome an attractive quality residential development which could provide needed housing, ideally social, but not in the form of this proposal. There have been many concerns raised in response to the proposal by other local residents and councillors. I personally have 3 key concerns: the density of the scheme, the proximity of the houses to Annington Road, and the need for such an extensive excavation for a basement. On number 1, the density of the scheme is far too overdeveloped for such a small site. It feels like commercial opportunism over sensitive development and comfortable living for existing and new residents. The site is literally jam-packed. To the south, the west and the north of the site, there is a more open, lower level residential streetscape. The proposal feels incongruous to these three directions. A precedent seems to have been made mainly through the dense development of properties to the east, principally the old police station, which is developed into flats and houses, and obviously the mansion blocks more to the east of the site. On the second point, the 4 houses in the proposal are incredibly close to those on Annington Road. I hear 18 metres. I actually took a tape measure to several of the properties, and it's more like 30 feet between the back wall of the houses on Annington Road and the back wall of the new houses. Some of the houses on Annington Road have been through new ownership in the last years. New young families have moved in, back extensions have been done, and loft conversions taken place as well, which all put sight onto the back of these new 4 houses. The current view of Skye will be practically eliminated, and the houses feel overbearing. There is a real risk of privacy given how incredibly close they are, along with the obstruction of the skyline and reduction of light to the houses and gardens of Annington Road. The concept of garden for the new homes, which actually are about 2 metres deep and 2 stories below the neighbouring wall height, garden wall height, feel rather cramped and unpleasant if we start talking about them as being gardens for the use of small children. On the third point, my final concern is the underground car park. The plan demands excavation to the extremities of the site to provide accommodation for principally 8 cars. The excavation makes up a substantial part of the 18-month build time, and the entire site needing to be supported by concrete piles around the entire perimeter. This part of the build stands to cause an unnecessary amount of disruption and noise. Sorry, it's so many questions over there. The part of the bill stands to cause unnecessary amount of disruption.
You just couldn't hear the bell went about 20 seconds ago.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Sorry about that.
All I'd say is since the 2017 proposal, we've now got CPZ for residents in the area, and therefore we really don't need the amount of excavation and the carbon footprint that that's actually going to create and disruption through the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. If you just stay there, because people might have quite. Does anybody on the committee have a question for the objector? Councillor Colley Harrison.
Yeah, it's just on the question of density. It's actually perhaps more for officers to clarify, but the report doesn't really address density at all, other than saying it's no more dense than the previous application. So was the previous application considered too dense in policy terms?
Yeah, so the previous, yes, so the previous application, that was the original application, was consistent with the London plan at the time's density matrix. And this application, this scheme doesn't exceed that density. Yes, this revised scheme.
Hang on, we can't, if you don't put your mic on.
I assume the density matrix has changed since the previous application in terms of the mayor's plans changed and all that. So it's within terms.
Yes, the latest London plan actually took away the density matrix and moved to the design-led approach. So it certainly complies with that policy now.
And no other indications? Thank you, Mr. Holton. So we have the applicant. I assume the applicant team is here, are they? Hello? Yeah, so you need to, they get 3 minutes. Yeah, you don't have to use your 3 minutes, but I assume you want to. Hi, so you have 3 minutes. You can split it between you if you want, but if you could introduce yourselves, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mark Powell. We are architects Robinson, Kennedy and Gallagher, and we've been instructed by our client to resubmit this application. As you've said already, the case officer said this is a reapplication for an existing approved scheme with the same number of units, same density, and the same ancillary facilities. The application had a resubmission of support documentation so that we could check that everything was still within policy. They've been processed and submitted, and from that we've taken on board the positivity that was from the previous application and moved that forward to resubmit the application. I don't think really there's anything more we wanted to really say really. We thought that the case officer had put the case forward quite well, and the scheme sort of speaks for itself in terms of it addresses the issues. To answer your question, the previous councillor had, you're correct, it is a 2 metre width to the corridor, to the access. That widens up after about 4 metres to about 3.5 and then widens again to about 6. No, thank you.
Thanks. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Yes, Councillor Blake.
So in terms of digging out for this car park and the basements, how long do you estimate that work would take in terms of weeks or months, or to actually, you know, I'm thinking about the disruption and the noise. And are you able, I mean, yeah, so how long will it take to do the really noisy, disruptive work, which I assume digging out the basement and the car park would do?
On the basis that we're not 100% sure, because it hasn't been analysed properly yet, but an educated guess is that we're talking about something like 48 to 56 months, 56 weeks, sorry. Obviously that's subject to what we find in the ground, because again, being the previous use, we're not too sure how big a foundations we've got and what we need to break out. But again, all those things could be considered as part of a planning condition, because again, you're right, breaking out concrete substructure is time consuming. So again, we don't accurately know that, but there are more modern methods these days of being able to reuse foundation and crushed materials for foundations, etc. Again, with the piling to retain the edge of the site, we've looked at possible options of piling that may be more convenient and less disruptive to the scheme. Again, it's sort of the next stage of the works, but primarily they can be done from one side. They don't disrupt the other side of the buildings and the boundaries. Yes, there's shoring up to be done, but that would be done under a safe construction method with boundary fencing put up, etc. But yeah, for about 52 to 54 weeks, I think would be a good estimate.
Thanks. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Yeah, the previous resident who spoke in objection mentioned that this has been ongoing as a neighbour for 7 years. So perhaps you can elaborate on why you hadn't brought the scheme forward within the previous application time period and what your forecast is, given that this application has a 3-year limit.
Yeah, thank you. We weren't actively involved as the architects on the previous scheme. So the long and the short of the story is the client actually had a falling out with the original designers, and then we were approached to resubmit the scheme on a basis of a like for like. So we don't know the ins and outs of what happened. I believe at the end of the day, they didn't advise the client that his planning permission was going to run out and that he should do something about it, and subsequently it just lapsed. And then, then COVID hit us, and the rest is history.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other questions for you. So, Mr. McKnocker, can you sum up where we are?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So recommendation has been amended slightly to amend the head of term in relation to affordable housing to put in a cascade that the money will be spent firstly in the Fortis Green ward, then the surrounding wards, which we will set out in writing, and followed by that all the other wards in the west, and then anywhere else in the borough. So that's an amendment to head of term number 1, and then there's an informative on the relating to the head of term for the Section 278 agreement to say that the reuse of the cobbles shall be explored. Otherwise, it's as set out in the report and the addendum.
Councillor Rice.
Yeah. The 277 odd thousand given is not given to be hawked around west of the borough to the various wards. It was given for housing requirement in the east of the borough. It wasn't given Forest Green gets some and Muswell Hill gets something else and so on. That's not the way. It is given for provision of housing elsewhere.
The recommendation is for off-site provision, so it's been suggested that that should prioritise this ward. If members don't accept that, we can stick with the existing head of term, but that was a suggestion we felt we could accommodate.
As far as I'm concerned, the money is given by the developers to provide housing elsewhere. My preference would be to provide housing in Forest Green.
Yeah, I think that is exactly what this this addition will say, that this is to be used in Fortis Green ward. But if in the event it can't be, then it would go to a neighbouring ward. That's an addition. That's what's been suggested. Yeah. Okay. Did you? Councillor Corley-Harrison, yes.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the major changes is in relation to the affordable housing. Given we haven't been provided with the figures, I think this item should be adjourned to a future meeting, actually, and that we should be provided the viability statement in full before we make a decision on this. I'd also recommend that before that meeting, given that it's in a conservation area, the QRP reviews the design with updated policies. So I propose that.
You're Councillor Blake.
Yeah, sorry, I don't understand Councillor Corley-Harrison's. Sorry, can you just explain your rationale behind that, please?
Well, my rationale is that we haven't seen the full viability statement. We're taking it on word of the officers on the evening that that 20% it's within the 20% profit line that is a broad industry standard, but we haven't been able to see it. As Councillor Mitchell said, the whole thing's redacted.
Well, sorry, Chair.
So basically, we have a motion to defer. We can't have a motion for very much else than that, but we don't have a seconder for that at the moment. Yes, Councillor Ross.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer the decision on this. So the reasons for your deferral are, please, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
That we haven't been provided sufficient information to make a reasonable decision as a committee.
I think just on that point, I would advise that the council's third-party independent expert assessor has looked at this on our behalf and found that this is the maximum reasonable amount. So, as set out in the report, we're satisfied that there's the information before committee that there is needed to make a decision. The transparency that is expected in terms of publishing the Viability report hasn't been there, but that can be published hereafter, and that won't in any way affect the decision.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, well, as I raised the issue about the independent assessment of the Viability report, I mean, in my experience, it's always very difficult to challenge those, but I certainly would like to see it. So if we do decide to proceed and vote on this, can we have our commitment that it will be published so that we can see the actual figures which are currently redacted.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think we have to vote on Councillor Corley-Harrison's motion to defer the decision on this to a future committee. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? Councillor Basu, are you abstaining?
Yeah. He says yes.
Are you abstaining? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so that motion falls. So then, if you can remember what the substantive motion was that Mr. McKnocker read out, which is to grant subject to?
Yes, subject to an amended head of term number 1 for the cascade for spending the affordable housing, amended informative in relation to the 278 works and as set out in the addendum.
So all those in favour, please show. And all those against? And abstentions? Thank you. So that's granted 7 in favour, 0 against, 2 abstentions. Thank you. And thank you for coming in to talk to us this evening, Mr. Holton, and to the applicant team.
Chair, could we have a short comfort break, please?
We may. Can we be as quick as possible there? Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, Okay, so now we'll go on to HGY 2022-0035. If you can take your seat, please. Land at What's Close, London. And I think Tanya Skelly is presenting. Over to you, Tanya.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, members. Good evening, everyone. I'm presenting the land at Watts Close N15. The proposal is for the demolition of 11 dwellings and community building and replacement with 18 homes for council rent, erection of 6 two-story family houses and 12 flats in two three-story blocks, including 2 wheelchair user dwellings. The proposals include 2 wheelchair parking bays, amenity and play space, landscaping, cycle and refuse and recycling storage. In front of you is an overview of the area with What's Close with the red arrow. To the east is the Brunswick Road open space and the surrounding streets. A close-up into the block plan of the existing site with the existing bungalows in the main area and the existing community hall to the northeast. The site location map of the proposed development is shown here, with the main development fronting a communal area and a pair of detached houses instead of the community hall to the northeast again. This is an aerial view of the site looking from the south, looking onto single-story bungalows accessed from the vehicle entry on Seaford Road in the left bottom corner. The community hall would be right to the top right corner and is just off this photo. A few photos of the site and its surrounding. Photo number 1 to the left top is looking at the entry to the site from Seaford Road. To its right is the flank wall of the terrace on Seaford Road right next to the site, where we have some parking at the moment. Photo number 3 to the bottom left corner is showing the pedestrian route through the site as existing. And the last photo to the right bottom is showing the site from Greenfield Road with the substation on the right and the right side of the bungalows and showing as well. Photo 5 to the top corner is showing the Lomond Close end of the site, which is to the north, with the corner in the middle, the single-story community hall. Below is the entrance to the community hall on Lomond Close as well, and to the right is the Brunswick Road open space, which I showed before to the east of the site. The main issues covered in this under this proposal are the principle of the development, design and impact on the character and appearance of the surrounding area, landscaping, public realm, amenity and play space, housing mix, tenure and quality of accommodation, impact on neighboring amenity, transport, parking, waste, recycling and servicing, and sustainability, energy and climate change. The site area is covering 2,741 square meters in size. It currently holds 11 homes, as I mentioned, single-story bungalows. All the existing homes, including the community hall, are to be demolished. 18 new homes of varying height and mix are proposed to replace the existing. This is compliant with policy DM11 of the Haringey Plan and London Plan policies D3 and D4 by providing housing intensification on site. The proposal includes 12 flats, which include 12 wheelchair homes and 6 houses. This results in a good proportion of family-sized units at 33% of the total. Landscaping public groundworks to complement the building is proposed and tree replacement as well. In front of you is a landscaping plan. the landscaping plan as proposed, with the communal shared space to the front on the south, and at the back some communal outdoor space as well, and private gardens to the townhouses. The pair of houses to the northeast have their own shared private gardens as well. This is a floor plan of the ground floor level of the entire development, with cycle storage and refuse storage shown within the ground floor, the cycle storage at the back on the sides, and for each individual townhouse as well. This slide is showing you the main access points. The pair of new houses instead of the community hall to the northeast is accessed from Lemon Close, and the main mix of flats and houses on is accessed from Seaford Road by car for deliveries and the two accessible parking bays, and pedestrian access as existing is provided still from Greenfield Road as well. The proposal has received strong support from the QRP. The design reflects the surrounding built environment and would be finished in brickwork with dark windows, metal paneling, and balcony railings. It incorporates framed balconies on 4 main front elevation and stonework detailing for headers and sills. The proposal improves the openness of the site by removing the pedestrian link between the bungalows and the hall, and thereby reducing safety risk. The materials are considered durable and unify with its surroundings. Here we see 3D massing views from the south to show the communal open space where some play equipment will be included, and the parking bays shown right here by the entrance from Seaford Road as well. These are the proposed front and rear elevations of the main section, with the 2 pair houses on Lomond Close shown with the rear in the right corner. This is a 3D view from Seaford Road onto the front elevation of the main section of the development. This is showing the development from Greenfield Road, with the substation to the right and the rear of the Lomond Close buildings behind. This is showing the frontage of the proposed buildings on Lomond Close. With regards to landscaping, the development includes 1 new play area to the front of the site, private gardens, communal gardens, improved pedestrian zones, limited vehicular access, and improved community safety. With regards to trees, 4 are retained, with T17 shown in grey to the top north part of the site, and T18 to 20 off-site, just off-site, with roots protected. 16 trees are proposed to be removed. 19 new street trees, fruit trees, and shrubs are proposed. This results in an overall gain of 3 trees and 23 overall. A daylight and sunlight assessment in accordance with the BRE guidelines was submitted. There will be no unacceptable harm to living conditions of neighbouring residents. The development responds to its surrounding with suitable heights, window orientation, larger windows, and obscuring where required. The flats are provided with balconies and terraces to the front and rear of the balconies. Townhouses and ground floor flats are provided with garden level amenity space. A communal outdoor space is provided to the rear of the center building. 2 central refuse and 2 central cycle storage facilities, including individual storage for townhouses, are included. In terms of energy, sustainability, and drainage, the proposal will achieve the GLA's zero carbon target through on-site means. No carbon offsetting contribution is required. The scheme is designed to include cross-ventilation to all flats, utilize rooftop solar panels to provide renewable electricity with living roofs for biodiversity and cooling. It is designed to reduce surface water runoff rates through the use of suds. Uses permeable paving, locally sourced materials, individual air source heat pumps, thermal insulation, and trees for shading, and reaches 0.52 urban greening factor level, which exceeds the minimum. Otherwise, a lighting strategy and secure by design certification is aimed for and proposed. The site has good public transport accessibility and is in a CPZ. Retention of pedestrian access from Greenfield and Seaford Road with a single vehicular access is designed into the scheme. There are 2 blue badge bays and electric vehicle charging points provided on site, and the scheme is to be secured as car-free via a Section 106 legal agreement. As such, the proposal is recommended to be granted planning permission subject to conditions and legal agreement. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions on the report? I've got Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the block on Lomond Close. Lomond Close, the buildings there, the houses there, they have a particular style. It's, from memory, it's brick on the ground floor and slatted wood on the upper floor. I mean, you did touch on it in the report, but I was wondering why there wasn't an effort to try and make that block more in keeping with Lomond Close. I think the report said they wanted to try and keep everything on the site sort of look harmonious, but obviously the site's a very odd shape, and the Lomond Close site really does look as if, or the Lomond Close block looks as if it belongs to Lomond Close, but the design of the building doesn't really fit with the close.
I think the idea was to provide a one style for the whole development. The quality of design on Lomond Close is varied and not as consistent, and the idea was to provide a really high quality design with durable materials that look modern, and therefore it was decided to have the same material for all the development.
Mr. Truscott, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, sure. Yeah, the brick in Lomond, the brick on all the houses is designed to match the brick on Lomond Close. So in many ways, the scheme will be more similar to the Lomond Close houses than the incredible variety of different bricks and stone cladding and pebble dashing and rendering and things like that you find on the houses on the other 2 roads. But yeah, there's a huge variety of different appearances in the area, and the idea is largely to be a simple, clean, dignified, well-proportioned, but overall simple new development in the area.
Thanks. Councillor Mitchell, and then.
Thank you, Chair. The 2 houses on Lomond Close, are they in fact 4-bedroom? At the page 206, it says all the houses are 3-bedroom, but then on page 300, they're labelled as 4-bedroom, which is great if they are, but just can that be clarified? And I wasn't clear why the 2-storey houses on Lomond Close appear to be so much higher than the neighbouring properties, the existing properties. So on page 303, for example, it shows clearly how much taller they are, yet they're only 2-storey houses. And then I just wanted to ask about the air source heat pumps. On page 232, it says that for all of the houses, those will be outside the houses, but for the flats, internal units are proposed. So, excuse my ignorance, but I always thought these things had to go outside. So, are we saying we're having air source heat pumps inside the blocks of flats? Is that possible? Thanks.
Thank you. So with regards to the first question, yes, it is a 4-bed home.
They're both.
Sorry, was it about 1 unit or 2?
No, it's certainly on page 300, it suggests it's just the pair of semi-detached houses.
Sorry, so it's both of them, yes.
Yes, whereas the houses that are part of the block in what's close are 3-bedroom houses.
Sorry, I would have to check that.
And then who can answer about air source heat pumps?
With regards to the air source heat pumps, I can confirm that for the houses, they are outside. But you're asking about the flats, isn't it? So for the flats, I need confirm. It might be that the applicant is able to help, but I would have to check where exactly they're located. It might be that they go on the roof, but the design for each of these solutions has been looked into carefully and considered where the best location is in terms of the length of cabling, and that's why it's different for the houses and the flats.
I think the point that Councillor Mitchell was raising, that there's the implication is they're inside the flats. Was that right? Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at paragraph 6631 on page 232, it says internal units are proposed. That's what I was querying. And the other point that hasn't been answered yet is about why is it that those houses on Lomond Close appear to be so much taller than the existing houses there?
Yeah, I think the applicant can confirm the detail of that, but they will, of course, need an outside air source, so there'll be an external facing them, whether they're built in or whether they're sort of standalone is probably a question for them. But that's not necessarily creating any issues in terms of noise. We're satisfied with that, and I think Richard can explain on the your point about height in relation to the properties in Lomond Close.
Yes, the existing houses in Lomond Close, houses and flats in Lomond Close, have a very shallow pitched roof. The proposed houses and flats in this development would all have a flat roof with a parapet, 1,100 millimetre high, 1.1 metre high parapet, so that then the solar panels and things like that can all go on the roof without cluttering up the skyline. And the people who go up to maintain the solar panels don't need to have fall arrest systems or those scaffolding style handrails to prevent them falling off the roof. They're safe behind the parapet.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Blake, yes.
I do want to ask about the loss of the community hall. There are a number of active residents groups in that area, and I also know of a youth group that have been looking for premises for quite a long time. If that Lomond Hall is to be demolished, are we having... It's gone. Okay. All right. So Lomond Hall has been demolished. So what efforts are being made to find a community hall for the community groups? It is a policy of this council that we encourage groups to get together, residents. So I'd like to know what we're doing to find an alternative to this hall, and what discussions have taken place, because as you can hear from the residents' reaction, people are worried about this because it's going to mean that effective residents groups and other groups aren't going to be able to meet anywhere close to the location where they live.
Thanks. Can anyone respond to that?
Thank you. So the report explains that the council intends to make funding available for residents and any groups who are interested to use for up to 5 years in the West Green Methodist Church on West Green Road. This is only 12 minutes walk away, and the funding will enable residents to meet up to 4 times each year in accordance with tenants' constitution and will be managed by Homes for Haringey. So it has been considered, it has been taken into account and is managed by the council.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think that that's enough. I think there are a number of residents groups. So if you're saying that I think that are looking for space now that this hall has been demolished, I certainly don't think, if you're saying up to 4 times a year, what happens if they do want to meet more than that? Do they have to pay for the hire of this room themselves? Are we saying that residents groups, the resident group that I'm involved in, meets once a month and sometimes more if there are urgent issues? And it's simply funding available for 5 years is not long enough. What happens after the 5 years? Where do they go? This proposal is not enough. And not only that, okay, I can understand perhaps on a temporary basis that they meet in the church, but it means that they can't personalise this. Everything will have to be set up and packed away when they go. So this proposal is not enough in the short term, but residents need something more permanent and something that people can own and that they can personalise and use and look after.
Just if I could come in on that, I think as Tanya has set out, we are satisfied that it complies with the policy, that it doesn't result in a shortfall. I think it would perhaps be helpful to hear from the applicant when they're given their chance to speak, just on the detail of how they arrived at that arrangement and how that satisfies the existing residents' needs.
Yes, Councillor Blake, last time.
Chair, it doesn't satisfy existing residents' needs. It is simply not enough, and what we are doing is allowing a community space to go. That's gone. But the fact is we're not putting in anything comparable. I'm sorry, Chair, but it is not satisfactory, and I want a commitment that, okay, if this is going to be a temporary measure, but I want a commitment that that something permanent is looked at for residents.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on the report? Councillor Colley-Harrison first.
Thanks. There's obviously a loss of trees. There's some replacement trees going in. I'm wondering why this development isn't getting the same provision as Ramsey Court, because the number of additional trees is not proportionally, there's not a proportional increase in the same respect as Ramsey Court had. So that's the question. And in terms of the existing tenants, albeit they are in temporary, what's described as temporary accommodation, we know that in many cases that's not necessarily temporary. Has there been any engagement again with the temporary accommodation tenants at all? And is there first options or anything like that for them to return?
I think should we get Mr. Fraser in on the trees, please? Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, the tree canopy cover here is much less than what is at Ramsey Court. The trees are much smaller. The majority of them are self-seeded that are, frankly, in the wrong locations. Some of them are less than half a metre away from the existing buildings. So there's nothing there of high value. There's nothing of moderate value. They are low quality trees. But the proposals do include a high quality landscape, in my opinion. They're much more appropriate trees. They're going to be planted in an area where they're allowed to develop.
On the other point.
Yes, well, in terms of the provision of affordable housing, there's an uplift here which satisfies that policy. So you could certainly put the question to the applicant about the detail of that, but in terms of the relevant London Plan policy, that's satisfied as set out in Para 6.3.16.
I'll state that for the applicant then, Chair. Thanks.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Chair. On top of page 217, it says it's a car-free site, and we're going to exclude 2. Does that mean we're losing 2 blue badge spaces?
Hang on. Don't just shout. We can't all hear that. When you get to speak, then we'll all hear you. Yeah.
Chair, if I can. There's 2 blue badge spaces provided as part of the development proposal, but the remainder of the development will be car-free.
Thank you.
Yes, I think.
Sorry, Chair. So we've lost two blue badge spaces, or we're gaining 2? I'm not sure.
You're gaining 2.
Yes, Councillor, that's a typo in page 217, so it should be include rather than exclude.
Yeah, thanks for that. There were no other Councillor Rice. Sorry, it's very difficult to conduct the meeting if I can't hear them properly.
At Lomont Close, there was a car park with houses around the periphery of that. Is that car park going to be built on now then? Is this what this is all about? Because if you look at the image on 303, that's at the bottom of those images, that's precisely how Lomont Close used to look. And you've got the intrusion of the new building in the corner, what used to be communities hall now is proposal of housing. But if you can see houses there with cars parked and so on, that was a feature of Lomont Close and that has stayed. Now, are these cars that you say car free? Is this the cars are gonna stay there or not?
There's no change to the parking arrangements outside of the red line. So that parking should stay. It's not being considered under this proposal.
Thanks. Are there any other questions for the applicant team? Then we'll go over to, hang on a minute. Fiona, what time do we need to suspend standing orders if we're going to hear from the pre-app?
So we can suspend at any time, but it should be before 10 ideally. So you can cover that now or just before 10, whichever is easier.
Can committee members be mindful that there's 2 more items on this agenda and how they feel about how late they want to stay tonight, and we'll ask the question before 10. So on this one, we're going on to, we have, I think, 2 objectors are here. If you see this table here with the microphones on, if you could make your way over to there, please. You can both go up, I think there's space. Subjectors, if you could introduce yourselves before you speak. There's a little button. Yeah, that's it. And then you have 3 minutes and then a bell will go off. You should hear. And if you don't, I'll have to interrupt you. Okay, thanks.
Hi, my name is Lucia. I'm living in Lomond Close. what I want to say, we will lose the lights because we have 3-story nursing home. Now we'll have from the dining room, we'll have another block of flats, will be 3-story. That will be like a sandwich. Then loss of privacy, because honestly, people will talk, it's too close to our building. I want to say the hall is already knocked out. We have lots of antisocial behavior problems. The people, the police and council, they blocked up all the alleyways. Now everything is open and people can again access the houses through the back gardens. Then there's a parking problem. They blocked up 4 parking bays and they didn't give us even notice before. And as well, when we got the planning permission, they was asking, the date was on the letter 2 weeks before, but we got the letter 2 weeks after that. We had only 2 weeks to respond to this proposal. Then Seaford Road is losing 7 parking spaces. The people, because they didn't have time again to address this problem. And as well, when they demolished the hall, they started 7 o'clock in the morning, the builders. Again, we lost more than 4 spaces because they blocked the 4 spaces, but the builders as well parking their cars on our car park. And the council never gave us alternative car parking space. Do you want to? And I will give it to Vivek and he will speak for me as well. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just check? Oh, okay. I'm Vivek Selassie. I'm from Lomond Close. Just want to say first that we have handed in a petition with 28 grounds of objection. I will focus on one of them because of the time, but I take it that the other 27 grounds of objection have been tabled. The petition had 105 names collected in 24 hours, last 24 hours. Why 24 hours? Is because the planning notification had been predated by 2 weeks, which gave us much less time. So what I'm going to be, I'll be happy to answer questions about the petition, its contents. I will focus mainly on one big question, money. What money is what the council is always short of when it comes to paying maintenance costs. Now, there has been no consideration at all of an alternative to that development there, which is a very expensive concrete jungle. The alternative, there are 11 bungalows at the moment on Watts Close. Now, these could be rebuilt with bricks to make them durable. And that would save all the costs of, all the draining costs and that kind of, all the infrastructure costs, which will now be demolished to make way for that new development. Now, we've been trying to find out from the promoters how much this new development will cost. There was no response, and there was a blank in the, I think, page, I will tell you the page number later on, in the committee engagement report. A cost hasn't been thought of, and what we have in the planning application is a cost which would be between 2 million and 100 million pounds, which is a wide range, which means that the promoters, the council, have not given thought to the cost of a development. Now, what would be the most likely cost of a development? It's simple. It's midway between 2 million and 100 million. That's 51 million, a lot of money. What the promoters have not done, they have not compared the cost of this development with the cost of rebuilding the existing bungalows on the same infrastructure, using bricks and making it durable. Instead, all that structure is going to be demolished, replaced by new, deeper infrastructure. So if I want to make a comparison here, we think about a bungalow would cost about £300,000, let's say. Now there are 11 bungalows at the moment on what's close. Now, assuming, I take the point the councillor made over, but it's for simplicity, assuming that the Lumen Hall is replaced by 2 bungalows, that gives 13 bungalows. At a cost of £300,000, that's 3.9 million. Let's say 4 million. What's the difference with 51 million? That's a massive £47 million. Now, what do we get out of the extra £47 million? Well, 18 units minus 13 units is 5 units. Take £47 million, divide by 5. The cost of each extra unit will be about £9.4 million. Now, if I got it wrong because I went halfway between 2 million and 100 million, well, if instead of 51 million it costs half of it, then it won't be 9-10 million, with 5 million.
Thank you.
Do you know?
Thank you, Mr. Sanasi. Okay. I'm afraid that's out of time. So it was 6 minutes, and we split it between the two of you.
Okay, I understand. Can I just say very quickly?
Less than.
Can I just very quickly? But Lumen Hall has been demolished without planning permission.
Thank you.
That's what we should be doing today.
Thank you. Thanks. Do we have any questions of the Objectors Committee? No? No questions for the objectors. Okay, in which case we go over to the applicant team, and you have 6. Okay, so you have 6 minutes between you all, starting with Councillor Gordon. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start off by saying that I've been knocking, I think I'll just move that away because it sounds very loud to me. I've been recently had the pleasure of welcoming tenants into new homes that we've actually now been, that has actually now been built, and we've handed keys over. And I have to say it is one of the most pleasurable aspects of the job that I'm doing as the cabinet member. And this scheme that we're putting forward before the committee today is part of that ambitious house building programme that we've embarked on. This is going to be 18 new council homes at council rent. You can't get any more affordable than that. It is the most affordable product. And a third of those council homes are going to be 3-bed or more. 2 of the homes will be 4-bedroom homes. We are in desperate need for these larger sized family homes, and this is what the programme is providing. I'll let the officers come in relation to the question about costs, but we don't recognise those figures that were just raised by the objector there at all. What I do want to say, though, is that these homes, these family sized homes, will be of benefit to local people. With the local neighbourhood move scheme, it will be local secure tenants who will have the opportunity to relieve their own overcrowding because they will have first options on these particular properties. 2 of the homes are fully wheelchair accessible. All of the homes are fully adaptable. 3 in 10 people on the housing register have a disability, and that's why we have built into the house building programme that the council has devised a large number of accessible homes and a large number of family-sized homes. We are trying to push onto these sites as much family-sized housing as we possibly can, and as our council, as our costs allow. And again, we're raising the bar in terms of quality, in terms of the green credentials, net zero, as you heard the officers outline in the application proposal. Communal green areas, planting with play routes through the planting, shared gardens, a growing area, solar panels, green roofs. It gives low running costs. It means that it prevents overheating. These are high quality homes that we are building, and they are built with designs, high quality designs that are in sympathy with the neighbourhoods. I'll leave my remarks there so there's time for officers to come in and add any comments.
Thank you, Councillor. And just to add Councillor Gordon's comments on accessibility, one of the 4-bedroom homes.
Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry, Jack Gould from the Housing Delivery Team. One of the 4-bedroom homes has been pre-allocated to a family with a profoundly disabled child and will be adapted accordingly. Turning to the point that was raised by members and by members of the public concerning the community hall. The community hall has been out of use for some considerable period of time. We consulted with the former chair of the Tenants Association at great length in order to accommodate the requirements. The number of meetings that we've agreed to fund is entirely in accord with their recommendations. The recent demolition of the hall occurred, unfortunately, because of an outbreak of asbestos, damp, and other structural problems. I'm going to hand over now to the project architect, Jordan Palmer.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jack. It's been summarised really well. I think the aspirations for the site. It presents a real opportunity to provide the homes that are needed firstly, but also it's a chance we discovered when we first visited to actually address some of the real issues on the site to do with access, antisocial behaviour, illegibility of movement across the site. And I think it's been well received through the process, through the QRP and with planners in pre-application discussions. The design evolved to actually address some of those fundamental concerns by creating a link between the two streets, providing a simple, sort of clean single block that faces south, provides dual aspect homes, is built to the highest energy standards, as we've sort of touched on already, and is going to be built using sort of the latest building technologies so that you get real quality homes that are going to last many years and serve as many genuinely needy people and families as this site can reasonably sustain.
Thanks. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Corley-Harrison.
So I refer back to my previous question, which was, are existing tenants on the plot going to be offered first option, even if they are in temporary accommodation? The second question is, can you give me an understanding of what co-production, not consultation, what co-production has happened with existing residents and neighbouring properties to get to the design and layout and facilities that's currently within the site? And then on the design aspect, I'd like to understand why you have ignored the QRP's recommendation for the standalone 2 semi-detached buildings to be of a different design style to the larger block as referred to earlier, and why that's not more in keeping with the street properties there at the moment, and also what you have done with the QRP's comments regarding external balconies being a storage facility. That doesn't seem to have been resolved. Also, I appreciate that design is much more than aesthetic, but I mean, we've seen a lot, I've seen a lot of designs come before this committee in the last 4 years. And I have to say that I think from a street level aesthetic, this is one of the worst to come before committee. And there's a general thread that applications being brought forward by this council, their own applications, the design is not of a standard that you would expect in the private sector. And as a committee, we are resolved in some ways to give leniency to that because we're providing council homes by accepting this. But the council needs to up its game because this is just brick blocks with external gutters, external downpipes. There's absolutely no detailing.
Councillor Corley-Harrison, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. Sorry I'm rude. Just hold your thought. We're 2 minutes to 10. We have the team from St Anne's Development sitting over there. Are we minded to extend standing orders, suspend standing orders to be able to hear that pre-app after this tonight? I want to ask the committee their view on that quickly. Would you agree to suspend standing orders or not?
No.
What's the view? Yes, no. Be vocal, please. Okay. I'm St Anne's team. I'm really sorry we didn't get there. I tried my best. Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Well, I think I made most of my point. I would like to know really what the council's property team are going to do to improve design standards. This isn't necessarily a critique of the architect. I'm sure that you are restrained by the brief that you are given and probably funding in some respects. But, you know, if we're looking at this project in 10 years' time, I don't think anyone's going to look at it and give it any kind of awards, I have to say. And I think we can set a standard, and we're not doing at the moment, and that's a disappointment.
Through you, Chair. Dealing with the first question, Councillor, regarding the existing tenants. Those who qualify for the Neighbourhood Move Scheme will, of course, be given first opportunity. The remainder are temporary accommodation tenants who will be housed in accordance with our TA policy and with the law regarding TA policy. But the Neighbourhood Move Scheme will provide priority for secured tenants in the area. Turning to your second point regarding co-production, extensive consultation and discussion was had both individually and collectively with a number of people in the area, all of those residents who expressed an interest in being involved, and certainly insofar as the design is concerned, and certainly insofar as the landscaping is concerned, those who wished to participate had their views heard and taken into account. I'll pass over, if I may, to Jordan to answer your detailed design points.
Yeah, thanks for the point raised. With houses, I think we've touched on that earlier already. The scheme, you know, albeit in two parts, this is all being developed simultaneously. There wasn't really considered buildings of sufficient sort of quality to drive a particular aesthetic to the north of the site. Having said that, the brick choice, you know, actually came out of looking at the context immediately adjacent to that part of the site. And the scale and mass of the buildings we felt works in harmony with its neighbours. The balcony privacy, there's actually railings which are flat rails which are angled, so when looking from below there'll be some screening from certain angles because of the nature of the way the metal works designed. There's obviously, for the main houses and the family units, there's actually back gardens with significant private space. So, you know, where you've got larger units, that's where things would be stored, if they are at all. And then the design point, I mean, that one is quite a subjective matter. We've obviously been through reviews at every level with the planning team and with design review. You know, even in those sessions, there's differences of opinion, but I think we've reached sufficient consensus as a team. They're intended to be simple buildings. I think they are, you know, a simple palette of materials. They are quality. They're put together in a way that they will have an impression of quality and sort of resilience. They have, you know, deep brick reveals to windows, masonry surrounds, parapets and lintels, and you know that's intended to present itself simply. The massing and the form and the stepping of the buildings is also meant to break it down. The balconies will provide interest across the main frontage, we thought.
Thanks. Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be quick. Well, you've talked about extensively consulting, but you haven't given any figures. So I'd like to know, perhaps you can write to me and tell me what that extensive consultation existed. And why is it then that we have residents here saying they only received the letters 2 weeks before the deadline, that there are residents saying car parking spaces are going to go. I don't know what the alternatives is to that. So if we are talking about extensive consultation and co-production, it seems to me that we're playing catch up on quite a lot of issues, and I think that that is disappointing. But perhaps you could set that out for me, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, of course, Councillor, I'll write to you with specific details of all of the consultation. There were a number of public consultation events that were held, and all those who attended gave their views. Their views are recorded. We also had the Commonplace website available for a number of weeks, and all of the views that were recorded on that I will make sure are provided to you. I think the suspension of car parking bays that was referred to earlier was in connection with the asbestos removal that took place at the former community building. The contractor there had applied for and received permission for bay suspensions. Those suspensions were short term. If any of